Strange, isn't it? Someone can spend their whole life working hard, loving their family, showing up day after day, and still not realize their health is fading, not with a crash, not with a siren, but quietly, like a candle losing its flame one breath at a time. You wake up, rub your eyes, and feel off, not sick, just slower. Your balance feels a little strange when you stand. You reach for the wall, tell yourself it's nothing, just tired. You go on with your day, but something's different. You mix up a few words, laugh it off. You forget where you put your keys. Again, at night, your arm feels heavy. You think you just slept on it wrong, and in the morning, you feel fine, mostly, so you ignore it. But here's what most people never hear. Not all strokes feel like strokes. Some come like thieves. They don't steal everything at once. They take it in pieces. One forgotten name, one dizzy step, one small part of your mind, slipping through the cracks before you even know it's gone. They call it a silent stroke, not because it's harmless, but because it doesn't scream, it whispers, and in that whisper, too many people lose their chance to change things. I've seen it. People who looked healthy, who worked long hours, who said they'd rest later. People who didn't have time to go to the doctor until they couldn't walk. Silent strokes are like rust on an old bridge. You don't see it at first, but little by little, it weakens everything beneath the surface, and by the time something breaks, it's already been broken for a long time. What's dangerous about a silent stroke isn't just the damage, it's what it hides, because after that first quiet one, there's often a second, then a third, until suddenly, the lights go out, and no one saw it coming. You might be wondering, how would you know? What does a warning sign even look like? If it doesn't feel like a warning, it can look like being just a little more tired, just a little more forgetful. Moment where you reach for a word and can't find it. Second where your hand doesn't quite obey. A brief flicker of dizziness when you turn too fast. Small things, so small. In fact, you'll probably ignore them or joke about them. Call it getting older, call it stress, but when you start stringing those little things together, you begin to see the outline of something bigger, not a fire, not an earthquake, but a slow, quiet shift, like the tide pulling away from shore. You don't notice it until you're standing on dry sand, wondering where the water went. I'm not here to scare you. That's not my voice. But I am here to tell you. Sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't pain, it's silence. And your body, even in its silence, speaks, in soft stumbles, in forgotten thoughts, in mornings that feel just a bit heavier than they should. You don't need to panic, you just need to listen. That's where change begins, because real health isn't measured in heartbeats or blood pressure alone, it's how you move through the world, how your hands feel when they write, how steady you stand when the ground shifts, how clear the morning feels when you rise, and if something feels off, even slightly, don't brush it away, not this time. Because the clock may still be ticking, but if it's off by even a second a day, eventually you'll start missing every train. It doesn't happen all at once. That's the part no one tells you. You don't just wake up one morning and lose your balance, or forget your daughter's birthday, or find your left hand weaker than your right. It happens slowly. A little more salt in your dinner each night, a little less sleep, pushed aside by one more show, one more email, one more worry, a little more stress, the kind you carry in silence because you don't want to burden anyone else. You think you're doing fine. You go to work, you check the bills, you drive the car. Everything's still moving, but something inside you isn't. There's a heaviness in your chest some days, not pain, just pressure, like your heart is sighing. You stop walking as far. You tell yourself it's just the weather. You drink another cup of coffee to fight the fatigue. You call it aging, but sometimes it's not aging. Sometimes it's warning. I once knew a man worked as a teacher for 35 years. He was kind, quiet, took care of his wife after her surgery. He never complained, never missed a day of work. And every night, he added a little more soy sauce to his rice. Slept just a little less. Said he'd get a checkup next month. When he finally collapsed on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, they told him the stroke had been coming for years. Not minutes, years. The blood vessels had been narrowing quietly, like a path in the woods slowly overtaken by vines. No one could see it from the outside. He didn't even feel it. But inside, the body was holding on, until it couldn't anymore. That's the thing about high blood pressure. It doesn't knock. It doesn't shout. It just rises slowly, steadily, like water behind a dam. And one day, the wall gives way. Your body is patient. It will carry the burden as long as it can, until the weight you don't see becomes the moment you can't stand. So many people think being healthy means looking strong, having energy, eating well most of the time, but the real damage isn't in what you feel today. It's in what you've ignored for years. How often do you really rest? Not scrolling, not distracted, not half listening, but resting in stillness? How often do you breathe deeply, not because a watch tells you to, but because your soul finally exhaled? How many days do you walk outside, just to remember you have legs meant for more than driving? It sounds simple, too simple, maybe. But that's the trick. Silent strokes are built on silent habits, and the same way we build harm, we can build healing. One low-sodium meal, one night of true sleep, one honest breath when no one's watching. The danger is real, but so is the choice. You don't need to fix your life overnight. You just need to notice what's already speaking. The dizziness that passed too quickly, the words that felt stuck on your tongue, the numbness that faded before you told anyone. These are not just moments. They are messages. And maybe this time, you'll listen. Stress doesn't always feel like panic. Sometimes it feels like nothing at all. You wake up. You make the bed. You brew the coffee. You check the phone, not because you want to, but because you're afraid not to. There's a tension that lives under your skin, but it's quiet. It doesn't scream. It just stays. You carry it to work. You carry it home. And when people ask how you are, you smile and say, I'm fine. Because most days, you are. But some nights you lie awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking of bills, of parents, of children, of things left unsaid and decisions long past. And your body, even while you rest, is still fighting something. Not a virus, not a disease, but the pressure of constantly pretending you're okay. You don't notice it right away. No one does, but the body keeps the score. Your heart beats a little faster. Your blood vessels tighten just a little. Your brain runs hotter than it should. And day by day, it gets harder to breathe without feeling like you're behind on something. Stress. Real stress doesn't look like a breakdown. It looks like functioning. It looks like doing everything, but feeling nothing. And when that stress becomes chronic, the kind that lasts not hours, but years, it begins to wear down the body in places you can't see. It raises blood pressure, thickens the blood, makes the heart beat erratically when you least expect it. And all of it, every bit of it, brings you closer to the cliff you never saw coming. I once sat across from a woman, late 50s, still working, caring for her aging mother, helping raise her grandchild on weekends. She told me, "I don't feel sick. I just feel empty." She laughed when I suggested she slow down. "I'll rest after this season," she said. That season never ended, and one day she forgot how to sign her name. They called it a silent stroke. I called it the weight of 10,000 days, carried without rest. You don't have to be falling apart to be in danger. You just have to be slowly fading, while telling yourself this is normal. But it's not normal. It's just common. And there's a difference. You were not built to live in constant tension, to go years without pausing, to be everything for everyone and nothing for yourself. So if you've been holding your breath for too long, let this be your permission to exhale. To say no, to sleep in, to cry if you need to walk away from things that look urgent, but aren't, because the body listens, even when the mind tries to be strong. And stress, when left unspoken, can become the silent architect of something far worse. But peace, even in small doses, can become your shield. Not all healing is heroic. Sometimes it's just a quiet choice made today. Some messages don't come in words, they come in a flicker, a stagger, a pause too long to be normal, but too short to be serious. You stand up too quickly, and the room tilts. Just for a moment, then it's gone. You laugh it off. I got up too fast. Maybe you did, but maybe your blood flow hesitated. Maybe your brain had to wait just a second longer than usual to catch up. You forget a word, not a big one, just a name. You snap your fingers, trying to pull it from the air. 5 minutes later, it comes back. You tell yourself it's nothing. We all forget things sometimes, and that's true. But you've been forgetting more lately. You chalk it up to stress, to age, to being tired. But when you string those little forgettings together, they start to spell something. You go to grab your mug, and for a split second, your hand doesn't respond, or it moves strangely. You shake it off, literally. No pain, no numbness, just a weird second. When you don't even mention to anyone, but your body was trying to say something. These aren't accidents. They're echoes. The body doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. And when we ignore the whisper, the shout comes later, in a hospital room, beneath cold fluorescent lights, while a doctor tries to explain something that's already happened. I've seen men cry in those rooms. Not because of pain, but because they looked back and saw the trail of small signs they ignored. That stumble in the hallway, that strange heaviness in one leg, that moment they couldn't smile fully on the left side of their face, but thought it was just fatigue. They remembered too late. And I tell you this not to scare you, but because you still have time. The warning signs of a silent stroke are quiet on purpose. They don't want to ruin your day. They just want to be heard. And most people, they're so used to pushing through everything, they've stopped listening to themselves. But your body hasn't given up on you yet. The tingling in your fingertips, the way your vision blurs for half a second when you stand, the random confusion when you walk into a room and forget why. These aren't just annoyances. They're signals, like a crack in the windshield, small but growing. You can still pull over, still repair what's breaking, still avoid the wreck, but only if you're willing to pause, to notice, to ask, is this normal for me, or just something I've learned to accept? There's a difference between being tough and being numbed out, and there's wisdom in checking the quiet places, the small reflexes, the minor hesitations, the rhythm of your own body when no one's watching. That's where truth lives. And sometimes, that's where the danger starts. But if you can catch it early, you can change the ending. You've been strong for a long time, haven't you? Even when you were tired, you kept going. Even when you were worried, you smiled for others. Even when you felt something was off, you told yourself, just get through today. And you did, again and again. But here's the truth no one says out loud. Strength has a cost, not the kind you see in your muscles. The kind that lives in your silence. The cost of not asking for help. The cost of never slowing down. The cost of treating every warning sign like an inconvenience. Because somewhere along the way, you started believing that pain was weakness. That rest was laziness. That asking questions, even about your own body, made you dramatic. So you pushed through. You ignored the flutter in your chest. You brushed off the headache that wouldn't go away. You kept walking, even when one leg felt strange. Because that's what strong people do. Right? They don't stop. They don't complain. They keep going until something stops them. I once sat with a man in his 60s. A builder. Calloused hands, steady voice. He said, I thought I could tough it out. Turns out I was toughing out a stroke. He'd had 3 silent ones. Small, quiet breaks in his brain that no one saw. Not even him. He cried when he told me this. Not because he was weak, but because he realized no one had ever told him it was okay to slow down. Not once in 60 years. There's a kind of damage that doesn't come from illness, but from expectation. The expectation to be fine. To keep going. To never ask, is this normal? But you're not a machine. You're not meant to ignore pain. You're not meant to hold everything together while your body whispers, please, let me rest. And if no one has said it before, let me say it now. You are allowed to feel. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to check on yourself, even if nothing looks broken. Because strength isn't in the pushing. It's in the noticing, the choosing, the quiet decision to care before it's too late. If your arm tingles and then goes numb for a moment. If your thoughts scatter and don't come back right. If you forget your own street for a second. You don't need to panic. But you do need to pay attention. You're not invincible. And that's okay. You're human. And sometimes, being human means letting go of the idea that you have to carry everything alone. You've been strong long. Enough. Now it's time to be wise. Some wounds bleed. Some swell. Some turn purple and fade into stories you can point at years later, saying, that's where I got hurt. But some wounds don't show up on the skin. They leave no mark. They don't limp. They don't scream. They just change you. A silent stroke is like that. You don't wake up paralyzed. You don't collapse in a public place. You just feel different. You forget how to do something simple, like tying your shoes, or reading a sentence, or holding a spoon, and you tell yourself, it's probably just stress. It's probably nothing. It'll pass. But it doesn't. Not fully. Not the way it used to. And here's the part no one tells you. Silent strokes are real strokes. They damage brain tissue. They change how signals move. They alter tiny parts of who you are, how you speak, how you think, how you move, and sometimes, even how you feel. You might not notice right away, because the body is good at adapting. It hides the loss. It finds a new path. It fills the silence with something close enough to normal. But if you look closely, you'll see it. The hesitation when reaching for a word, the struggle to follow a conversation, the sudden irritability you can't explain, the odd fatigue that lingers even after a full night's sleep. These are not personality quirks. They are traces, the ghost prints of something that passed through quietly, but didn't leave you untouched. I remember a man, mid-40s, sharp mind, ran a small business. One day, he started forgetting small things, passwords, meetings, directions to places he'd driven for years. Everyone thought he was just overworked. So did he. It wasn't until he got lost driving home, not far, just a few blocks, that his wife insisted he get checked. The scans showed multiple, silent strokes, small, old, hidden, but very real. He cried when the doctor explained. Not because of fear, but because he realized he had missed the signs. He thought he was just tired, just aging, just busy, but his brain had been calling for help. And he never picked up the phone. Not all damage is visible, and not all healing begins with medicine. Sometimes it begins with paying attention, with believing yourself when something feels wrong. Even when others say you look fine, you might still smile, still drive, still go to work, but something inside feels a little further away, like a part of you took a step back and never fully returned. That's what a silent stroke can do. No scar, no cast, no one bringing you flowers in the hospital. Just a new version of you, quietly stitched together by a moment you didn't even feel. But here's the hope. You are still here. You can still notice. You can still act. You can still change the path before the next moment arrives. Because every time you listen to your body, every time you say, something doesn't feel right, you reclaim a little piece of yourself before it's taken. We live fast now. Even when we're sitting still, there's always a notification, always a message, always something unfinished, somewhere in the back of your mind. You wake up already behind. You eat quickly, sometimes not at all. You walk with your eyes on a screen. You listen while typing. You rest with noise in your ears. Everything moves, and you try to keep up, but your body doesn't move at that speed. It never did. It wasn't built for urgency every hour. It wasn't designed to live without pause. It's ancient, slow, rhythmic, wise in a way modern life no longer respects. So one day, it slows down. Not because it's broken, but because it's trying to protect you. You forget things. You misplace names. You lose your train of thought mid-sentence. And instead of slowing down with it, you drink more coffee. You sleep less. You push harder. But the body isn't a machine. It's a living, breathing memory. And when it's overwhelmed, it speaks in signals: fatigue, tension, foggy thoughts, moments of imbalance. You ignore them, not because you don't care, but because you don't have time to care. Because stopping feels like failure. Because resting feels like falling behind. But here's the thing. Your body has no interest in your calendar. It only knows what it feels. And when it starts to falter, when the blood doesn't reach the brain quite right, when a small clot forms and dissolves before you even know it happened, you don't get a headline. You get a whisper, misstep, a stutter, a second of confusion that vanishes before you can name it, and the world keeps spinning. But your body remembers. I met a woman in her early 50s, marketing executive, sharp, always moving. She told me, I feel like my mind is buffering lately." She laughed when she said it. But her eyes didn't laugh. Turns out, she'd had 2 transient ischemic attacks, mini strokes, silent, temporary, but very real. The signs were there. But the noise of life was louder. That's what we're up against. Not illness, but speed. A world that praises motion, even when it's heading the wrong way. And the antidote is not always medicine. Sometimes it's stillness, just 10 minutes of silence, a walk without a phone, a meal without multitasking, a single breath, slow, deep with no goal. Not because it fixes everything, but because it tells your body, "I'm here. I'm listening. You matter." That's how healing begins. Not in the A, but at the breakfast table, in your car. On a quiet Tuesday evening when you choose not to check your phone again. So if you've been feeling off, not sick, not broken, just off, it might not be age. It might not be stress. It might be the only way your body knows how to say, "Slow down before I make you." It's not just health we lose when we stop listening. It's time, it's memory, it's moments. You don't always notice what you're missing until it's already gone. The way your child looked at you at breakfast. But you were too tired to smile back. The laugh you could have shared with your partner. But you were too distracted to hear the joke. The walk you didn't take with your aging father. Because your legs felt heavy that day and you told yourself, "Next time." But next time is a fragile thing, and the body has its own clock. When a silent stroke comes, it doesn't just take neurons. It takes pieces of presence. It dulls the edges of your joy. It fogs the faces in your memories. It interrupts the way you once said, "I love you," without hesitation. That's the real cost. Not just blood pressure. Not just balance. But the life between the symptoms. You may still be here, but not fully here. Not the way you used to be. I once met a retired nurse. Caring. Bright. She had lived her whole life taking care of others. She missed her own silent strokes, 2 of them. Didn't notice until she couldn't follow a recipe she'd made 100 times. She stood in her kitchen crying. Not because she couldn't cook, but because she didn't recognize herself. "I used to be so sharp," she whispered. And she was. But being sharp isn't just about intellect. It's about connection. Being present in your own life. Able to remember what your husband said 5 minutes ago. Able to read a bedtime story to your granddaughter and not get lost halfway through. These things, they seem small, but they're everything. And when the body starts to break in silence, it doesn't always steal the big things first. It starts with moments. A joke you miss, a name you fumble, a kiss you forget to give, a familiar road that suddenly feels strange. It's easy to blame stress, or age, or busyness, but sometimes it's something deeper, something older, something that's been knocking quietly for a long time, and you still have a choice. To stop, to look up from the screen, to cancel one thing so you can really be in another, to sit across from someone you love and actually be there. Not just in body, but in mind, in spirit, in presence, because that's what silent strokes threaten most. Your ability to be here, fully. And the most tragic part isn't what the stroke takes. It's what it prevents you from giving. You may not remember when it happened, but your body does. A silent stroke doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't knock the way a heart attack does. It doesn't bring drama. It just arrives, quiet, precise, permanent. And when it leaves, Something in you is a little dimmer. You forget the word for something you used to say every day. You take longer to write a sentence. You stare at the fridge and wonder why you opened it. The doctors call it silent. But let me tell you something. It's only silent to the world. Not to you. You feel it. In the confusion, in the hesitation, in the way your kids start repeating things twice just to be sure you heard. And here's the hard truth. Most people who've had one silent stroke go on to have another. And the next one might not be so quiet. You might not walk the same, might not talk the same, might not know the same people who still know you. That's not fear, that's fact. And knowing it gives you a kind of power, because the body whispers before it shouts. And if you're listening, truly listening, you can still do something. Not everything, but something. Start with salt. Start with stress. Start with sleep. Start with saying no to one more obligation and yes to one more walk. You don't need to fix your whole life in a weekend. You just need to make space so your brain can breathe again. I once spoke to a man in his 60s, had a successful career, smart, capable. He didn't know he'd had a stroke until he tried to sign his name one morning and couldn't remember how the letters connected. They told him the scan showed damage, old damage. Months ago. He had no idea. He said to me, I kept thinking it was just stress. Or getting older. He paused, then looked straight at me. But now I realize that was the warning. And the moment he saw it for what it was, he changed everything. His schedule, his diet, his expectations. He didn't wait for a second stroke to remind him what the first one had already taken. That's what I want for you. Not panic, not guilt, just clarity, because it's still early. And that's the miracle. You're still before the next one. You're still able to hear this, to move, to think, to shift the weight of your choices before they fall too hard in one direction. And if the first one came quietly, maybe this moment can too. No noise, no drama, just a quiet decision. I want to stay here, fully, clearly present. There's something most people forget. The brain doesn't just remember facts. It remembers you. It holds your grandmother's laugh, the smell of rain on the first day of school, the way your child looked the first time they said your name. It's not just a machine, it's a mirror, a keeper of the small, quiet truths that made you who you are. So when a stroke, silent or loud, touches the brain, it doesn't just take a word or a movement. It takes a piece of your story. You might still know how to drive, still remember your address, but something in the way you see the world shifts. You walk into a room and forget why. You look at a friend's face and feel a half-second delay. You speak a sentence, but forget how it started. People call it aging, call it stress. But sometimes it's the brain asking for help before it forgets how. You see, memory isn't just stored in the mind. It's lived in gestures, in how you stir your tea, in how you hum the same tune when you're nervous, in how you pause before answering certain questions. And when those things fade, you don't just lose knowledge. You lose texture, depth, the quiet fingerprints of the life you've lived. I once sat with a woman in her late 50s. She looked fine, spoke clearly, but she told me something I'll never forget. I can still remember my wedding day, she said, but I can't remember why I loved him. There was a sadness in her eyes, not because she forgot a memory, but because she lost a feeling tied to that memory. Something had changed in her brain, something subtle, but irreversible. And she only realized later, after a scan revealed an old silent stroke near her temporal lobe. The part that stores emotion. That's the part no one talks about. A stroke doesn't just affect speech or walking. Sometimes, it takes away the music of a moment, the warmth behind a smile, the instinct to reach for someone's hand. But there's hope in this too, because just as the brain remembers pain, it can also relearn joy. With patience, with intention, with space. Not by rushing back to who you used to be, but by protecting what still remains. And the first step? Noticing the small cracks before the whole foundation slips. So if you feel slower than before, if your thoughts feel like they're walking through fog, if the memories come, but without color, don't ignore it. That is not weakness. That is a whisper, and it's asking, can you take care of me before I forget how to take care of you? You wouldn't know it just by looking. You could be walking, talking, laughing, and still, something inside is slowly tightening. Not pain, not dizziness, not anything you'd run to the doctor for, but pressure, steady, persistent, silent, high. Blood pressure is strange like that. It doesn't knock. It just waits. Waits while you sit in traffic, while you stay up late staring at your phone, while you salt your food a little more than usual, while you say, I'll rest next week. It doesn't scream. It whispers with every beat of your heart, until your vessels forget how to relax. You see, your brain is protected by the finest network of tiny blood vessels, so delicate, so precise. They're like threads holding a glass together. But when pressure builds, even the smallest crack can spill everything. That's how a silent stroke happens. Not in drama, but in accumulation. Like a rope pulled too tight for too long. Eventually, one strand snaps, then another. And before you know it, you're forgetting names, you're misplacing your thoughts. You're standing in a familiar place, but it no longer feels like home. I once asked a patient, did you feel anything? He smiled and said, no, I just woke up. And something in me felt quieter, like a room had gone dark and I couldn't find the switch. That's what this pressure does. It dims the lights slowly, so slowly you don't notice, until you forget what bright ever felt like. But here's the part that stays with me. He thought he was fine. Never smoked, ate decently, didn't drink much. But he never checked his blood pressure, because he felt okay. That's the trick. We think health is about how we feel, but real danger? It's quiet, it's kind. It lets you keep living your life, right up until it doesn't. I'm not here to scare you. You've heard enough warnings, enough numbers, enough charts. I just want to tell you this. The body asks before it breaks. Maybe it's the way your heartbeat changes when you lie down. Maybe it's the way your vision flickers when you stand. Maybe it's that odd pounding in your ears at night. Small signs, easily missed, but not meaningless. You wouldn't ignore a leak in your ceiling just because the floor's still dry. So don't ignore this. Check your pressure, even if you feel fine. Especially if you feel fine. Because the goal isn't just to avoid a stroke. It's to keep the lights on, in your memory, in your presence, in the life you still have left to live. It starts small. A hesitation. A moment where you walk into a room and forget why. You laugh it off. Everyone forgets sometimes. But then, you notice you don't enjoy your usual things. The music that used to calm you now feels like noise. The conversations feel heavier, even when they're light. You snap more easily. Sleep doesn't refresh you like it used to. You sit longer, think slower, and one day the thought comes quietly, I don't feel like myself lately. But you keep going, because what else can you do? You tell yourself it's age, it's stress, it's just a busy week, or a bad night's sleep. But deep down, something feels off, not wrong. Just unfamiliar. You start misplacing words, calling your keys the remote, or pausing in the middle of a sentence, searching for a word you've known all your life. It's not dramatic. It's not the kind of thing you tell people, but it's real. And it's scary, because how do you explain feeling like you're drifting when nothing looks different on the outside? I've seen it too many times, not in crisis, but in quiet conversations behind closed doors. A man who used to fix engines suddenly can't recall the order of tools. A teacher who forgets the names of her favorite students. A woman who stares at her morning coffee and can't remember if she already drank it. No pain, no warning, just a gentle undoing. You see, not every stroke looks like a fall. Not every warning sign comes with flashing lights. Some feel like a soft fog, a part of you going quiet, like a hallway light flickering in the back of your mind. You're still here, but not fully. And if no one's watching closely, if even you aren't, it's easy to dismiss it all as nothing. But it's not nothing. Your brain is how you know who you are. And when small strokes, silent strokes happen, they don't always take movement or speech. Sometimes they take clarity, or joy, or the ability to recognize yourself in the mirror of your own life. This is the part no one talks about. Not because it isn't real, but because it's hard to describe. So I'll say it simply. If you feel like something in you has dimmed, don't ignore it. Even if your scans look clean. Even if others say you're just tired. Even if a part of you wants to pretend it's nothing. Listen, not in fear, but in care. Because you still have time. Time to check. Time to rest. Time to slow down long enough to notice what's been quietly asking for help. The body doesn't betray you. It just whispers until you finally hear it. You wake up, same bed, same morning light. You stretch, brush your teeth, drink your coffee, and it all feels normal. No pain. No rush to the hospital. No dramatic sign telling you to change. So you keep going. Like always. And that's where the danger lives. Not in what hurts, but in what feels just fine. You tell yourself, I'm okay. I still get up, still go to work, still handle things. But deep down, you know, something's been off. Not loud, just quiet. Like your body's been trying to talk to you through tiredness that won't go away, through forgotten names, through the sudden heaviness in your steps, through the way your breath shortens when you climb stairs you used to take 2 at a time. But you tell yourself it's fine. And maybe that's the most dangerous sentence there, is I'm fine. Because sometimes being fine just means you haven't stopped long enough to feel what's really there. And maybe you're afraid to. I understand. I've seen people wait, not because they didn't care, but because slowing down felt scarier than pushing through. Let me say something. Just one person to another. You don't have to wait for a collapse to pay attention. You don't have to crash to be allowed to care for yourself. You can listen now. You can start now with something small. A glass of water before bed. A quiet walk with your phone left behind. A promise to check your blood pressure. Not someday, but this week. You see, change doesn't need fireworks. It begins in quiet choices. And no, you don't need to do it all at once. You just need to stop pretending that ignoring yourself is strength. That it's not. Real strength is slowing down long enough to hear the truth whispering from your own body. You are not a machine. You are not here just to keep going. You are here to live. And living means noticing that. So if you've heard something in these words, a tug, breath, a memory, maybe it's time to rest. To ask, to check in with yourself, not because someone told you to, not because it's urgent, but because you still have time. And time is only a gift. If you know you have it, so take one breath, the kind that reaches deep. And if this meant something to you, pass it on to someone who's still moving too fast to hear themselves. Because sometimes, the most powerful message is just a quiet voice saying, "You're not too late."